My apologies for those of you who are looking at this later. I did hit the record button a little late today.
So Chuck, we did get a response on another for more mental health resources and access that affordable and or a part of their health plan.
Perfect.
So I may have skewed the results a little bit in discussion of answers 1 and 2 and 3, but it's great to see consensus. Chuck and I had a little discussion about this. It's like, if we don't call it wellness and or well-being, then maybe what's more encompassing and what's larger, and we struggle to identify what that is. I mean, is it life? Is it life enhancement? What do we call it? And then at some stages, it gets so broad, it gets watered down. And if we start with a new term, then we're gonna have to start the education process all over again. Any other insight to share, Tyler and Chuck? Yeah. I didn't give any solutions yet or any strategies. I'm just sharing what's on the top of my mind.
Yeah, I know. I would agree with that. And from my lens in the workplace wellness space, at least in my organization at M3, we've started to have this conversation, right? Because we talked about the definitions of well-being and wellness and what does it mean? It's a little bit different for everybody. But what we're trying to do and incorporate into our own organization is really more of an employee experience, right? We're trying to build a life at X employer so that it takes into everything into consideration. And some of the things in the comments that we got back in the chat, Corey, so you can see it as human performance, life skills, we call it energy, meaningful life engagement. I think all those are extremely powerful in the sense of moving forward. But to your point, how do we take a step back and systematically change that conversation? So I want to float that to Chuck, being one of the leaders of the National Wellness Institute. What does that look like from your lens? And what do you think about as you drive kind of that message forward?
You know, when we really look at it, and this is definitely something that in the last 2 years that I've been here at the National Wellness Institute, we've had a huge conversation. As a matter of fact, had the same conversation with Ryan Piccarella before he left Wacoa, as well as with Karen Mosley over at Hero. And it's really, how do we define wellness as a whole? And National Wellness Institute still goes back to, Dr. Halbert Dunn's 1959 high-level wellness philosophy and his definition, the root definition of wellness, which is functioning optimally within the environment. And I see Kelly Schoonert just all excited about that, but she also knows why Halbert Dunn is such an influence in my life is because of who influences my life. And that's somebody by the name of Dr. Jane Allery, who really has pushed that name and that piece into it. And Kelly and Jane actually worked with each other at Ball State University before Kelly came up to UW Stevens Point. So this is where it gets really interesting, because I love the root definition, functioning optimally within the environment. And if we've got to look at it from the perspective of saying, if you have good environment and you are healthy, you have high level wellness. If you don't, you are not going to have high level wellness. But then we can look at it from that emerging wellness, which is you're healthy but a poor environment, protected health, which means you're unhealthy but you have high level wellness. Think about somebody like Dr. Stephen Hawking. That's always who I think about in that protected health piece. And then you have poor health, which is poor environment and poor health. So those are really the spaces that we've got to start to think about. And that's why when you think about underserved populations and underserved areas, those typically have poor environments, whether there's lack of nutrition, lack of access to healthcare plans and healthcare insurance and healthcare in general. That's to me where we've really got to look at it. So when we look at it, that's where we're focusing in on it, is functioning optimally within the environment, because it's easy to say and easy to do.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Chuck. Well, I think the lab conversation could be over. I don't know what else Tyler and I need to say. I think you just nailed it all right there. Tyler and I have a secret symbol. If we're getting a little too long-winded, I go like this for Tyler. So now we're letting you in, Chuck. Yeah, you don't have the beard or the stubble, but you can still pull it off, right?
I don't have the hair in general.
So, well, before we move on, I want to stay on this thread a little bit, Corey, and I want to ask you kind of the same thing. Is it's a little bit of a tangent, but if you were charged to lead a wellness reform, right, like nationally within your organization, whatever that might be, and you had no choice to comply to do this, what would be your 3 top priorities?
Well, I
Feel free
mean,
to feel
yeah,
free to add this into chat too.
I mean, that's a really good question. And I think that one of the challenges is, do we really know why people are unwell? So I think we kind of have to rephrase that question first in order to consider the reform. So, it's maybe like, I don't know, could you rephrase it a little bit to?
Yeah. So how about this? Well, let's start with that. Like, what's at the heart of why people are unwell or not well, depending on how
Yeah,
you
and
want to phrase it.
I think about this and I teach this all the time. And so I guess if people want to take notes or they want to record, it's up to them. I don't have the secret sauce or the secret recipe. But based on my perception of people I've worked with, the consulting, working with students, coaching, I think the challenge is wellness is so individualized, but first and foremost, people don't know themselves. And this is a slightly different spin on it. So people don't know themselves well. And what do you mean by that? Well, what do they hope for? What are their values? What are their dreams? What do they love to do? What's their purpose? When they get up out of bed, what are they jacked to do? What are they excited to do? And once they know that, then they can start to set goals and priorities, and they can align their actions. But how do you get to know yourself? This is the key. You need to intentionally reflect on how things are going, on who you are. Life's very dynamic, it changes. John Munson used to say it's like, or Chuck Corbin, it's like a river. There's ebbs and flows, and we know this very well in Stevens Point with the Wisconsin River. So my point is, you need uninterrupted time to intentionally reflect on your life and get to know who you are. And that's the challenge, because if you look at the data now, people are spending so much time online and they are so distracted by all the noise that they're not being mindful and being present and taking the time to reflect on who they are and where they want to be. And so there are all kinds of good purposes for, sorry, I'm going to share one thing with you really quickly. There are all kinds of really good reasons to spend time on social media. And here's the trend in social media use within the last 15 years. And you can see the number of users on YouTube, Facebook, and other devices. And people are engaged in social media for a lot of different reasons. And so one of the gaps is, do we know enough about the impact that social media is having on our health? There's data showing there's some good and there's some bad. So there's a gap that needs to be addressed. But what I want you to really focus on is the application. Where are people really spending their time? Because the two biggest barriers to sustaining healthy behaviors is time and money. So if people can't reflect on themselves and they can't prioritize healthy behaviors, how are they spending their time? Look at this. Since 2008 to 2018, more and more time is being spent online. And the next generation is spending even more time online. So what does that mean? That means, in some ways, wellness is competing. The typical wellness activities, the healthy behaviors are competing with social media apps. And they're not winning. We're not winning over people's time. They're spending more and more and more time online. So this is something I really hope to dive into in future workshops. And I'll be quiet. I think I'm probably getting the science here, but I'll stop sharing and I'll pause right there. And I think that's a big contributor to why people are unwell, at least within the last 10 years, as we're seeing depression rates go up, social isolation rates going up, mental health issues, more mental health and mental disabilities. And this is a global pandemic. Again, I'm not going to jump on a soapbox and say social media is terrible. I'm thinking we need to manage the time appropriately. We want people to be aware of how much time they spend on social media, and then really get to know themselves well and think of the other options, discover the other options that align with who they are and what they want and their goals. So I'll pause there so we can have a conversation instead of a lecture. Sorry about that.
No, I really think that's good information to use though, Corey, because like as you go through the statistics, and you and I have had conversations about this and diverting people's attention away from, some of those building blocks of life, right? I.e. good health and being moving and whatnot, we can understand what we're competing for time. I mean, just a quick raise of hands, who has this issue? I know I do. I get myself in that scrolling, right? And what photos coming up of Instagram. Thank you for sharing. This is coming from non-judgment. Like, I'm not here to judge you, but it's something I see all the time. You're in a meeting, someone's on their phone. That's why I appreciate you guys sharing your faces too, so I can see your reactions. I can see you guys thinking about the things that we're talking about. Again, not to get too long-winded, Chuck's got us a thumbs up. It's what we're dealing with as an industry, as in, humans in America, worldwide. Like, social media is at our fingertips, and we could talk about this until we're blue in the face. But that's what we're competing against, is a computerized algorithm that's driving that engagement and not that human connection and that interaction. So again, not to get too long, it's something that we have to be cognizant of. It's something that we need to think about with whatever field that you're in, whether it's workplace, public health, sales, whatever. That's your competition. That's part of it. So just make sure that that's there in the back of your minds.
Absolutely. And it's kind of funny because we actually started these live conversations, right at the beginning of COVID, with the idea that we knew that there was going to be a need for connectivity, this social interaction of some sorts, as we were starting to lose that personal and professional touch points that we had in either live conversations or, just having our conferences and seminars and gatherings. But what I've found interesting about this particular one is I think those of you who have been on these things more than once, we've tried to do everything we can to keep this fun and lively and entertaining and, a bit goofy, because we've got to make sure that energy stays high. But what we've also found is we have this brand new web of support from all over. I mean, let's face it, we've got folks in Hawaii here. I don't know about y'all, but I'd rather be with them in Hawaii right now. But we've got really beautiful weather today, so I'm not complaining too much. So that is, Lori, you got it. I'm coming. But the point is, that is really what this is all about. And I think too many times, and what I've seen, especially over the course of the last few last few months, is that people are still trying to kind of be who they are, even though it takes a lot of a different mindset to do it in a virtual way. And then we won't even get into politics. So, we just got to get through this sixth year of 2020 so that we can actually get into 2021 as well.
Yeah, so bottom line, it's really hard to engage people, period. And when you look at the time and where they're engaging, it's evident, it's clear. And if we try to compete, we're not winning. And we try to meet them where we're at, we're not able to do so. Is your app that you develop for health and wellness going to compete with Facebook? Probably not. They have the smartest psychologists and engineers on earth working with them. So anyway, if you were to talk about a priority, one of the priorities would be communication and promotion. And when you look at things where they are currently, we train wellness professionals on specific things, like exercise physiologists learn about everything in exercise. Dietetics, registered dietitians, learn about everything nutrition. The list goes on and on and on. We're all trained in a silo. And we're trained to learn everything about a particular field. And we're way up in the clouds. And then we're trying to create marketing promotional content for people way down on the ground. And we're struggling to be successful in engaging people and getting people to value health. Maybe we're not making it simple enough. We're not making it practical enough. And by the way, we're using the word wellness. People don't really know what it is. So those are a couple of the challenges. We got to figure out this education thing. We got to figure out communication. We got to figure out promotion, because a lot of organizations that are promoting wellness don't have much money. So they better do it effectively, and we better do a better job of educating everybody on what this is. How can we build this into systems that already exist? If 75% of kids are going to childcare facilities, let's build it in there. If
Or I have to laugh at like Kevin George just said, That's why therapists need therapists. And I love that comment.
Yeah, and if 75% of kids or 95% of kids are going to school, let's build it in there. If the majority of kids or excuse me, teenagers and young adults are going to college, let's build it in there. Systematically, let's build it into these sectors so that everybody's aware of what it is. So it's not as challenging to communicate and to promote it because it's just in the environment and everyone's aware of what it is. Sorry, getting a little long-winded again, but we're passionate about it, and these are the types of things we're hoping will drive innovation in a workshop series. And we're hoping to do this together, and we're loving the chat functioning. We have a few more questions we want to ask for chat. Is now a good time for segue, or do you want to add a couple things here, Tyler?
Jump on in and let's get moving.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing, and it's in line with what Corey was just saying from like a systematic approach. Is I've always contended that society in general just does not set our people up for success, right? When you drive around town, what do you see? You see instant access to unhealthy foods, you name it. So when I think about reforming wellness or making that change, it starts at a high level. We need to start thinking about those healthy cities and healthy living engagement things that we can offer up. How do we get more, more healthy food options? But with that being said, how can we make that the most accessible as well as the cheapest option? So, you can go to a fast food joint and get super cheap food that are going to be really unhealthy, but you're going to be hungry again in a couple hours. So how can we change that thought process, and how can we start to set whether it's employees, our fellow Americans, you name it, how can we set them up for success? And as I already mentioned, I work in workplace wellness. And one of the things that I want to talk about and kind of drive forward is something Corey and I have been talking about called paid time wellness. How can we compare that, like personal time off or whatever? How do we integrate that into the fabric of an organization, a public health entity that, instead of incentivizing somebody to go through a program or whatever it might be, biometrics, health assessment, how about I just pay you for 30 minutes to go outside and walk, exercise, eat healthy, you name it? How can I start to shift that paradigm that is the option and that's the conversation versus, hey, I want to like kind of tell you to do something. My hope, right, is in the long term, how can we start to change some of those things from a society's perspective? So it's just, again, accessible and a cheaper option, and that's changing environment. So
yeah. And I'll just add to that, Tyler, it's crazy. You look at Worksite Wellness, what do we ask people to do? Go to this online platform, usually outside of work hours, because you want them to focus on other things during work. And we are hoping that there will be engaging enough content out there to help people learn about and learn the skills necessary to adopt and sustain healthy behaviors. I mean, outside of work. And that's the way sometimes it feels. Like, Chuck, you can tell me a little bit about your experiences with CEOs of companies and leaders, but you go in there and you try to sell wellness and they're like, okay, yeah, what do you have for me that people can kind of do off on the side? It's not truly integrated. It's not part of the experience. It's kind of just, yeah, we'll have somebody come in for a day, do a training, do a lunch and learn, maybe some biometrics, maybe send them off to a platform, and that's good enough. Done, right? We did our thing, right? Can you share a little bit of that experience, Chuck, with what you've had with leaders?
Well, and what you run into on those kind of situations is I typically have not found the leaders per se to be the biggest roadblock. It's the director level. It's the frontline supervisors, because the frontline supervisors aren't properly trained, aren't properly dealt with. The directors are definitely, they have their directive, and their directive is productivity and making sure that the outcomes, and they don't understand that if you can actually reduce absenteeism by 2 days per employee per space, and you can see the financial costs associated with that. And by the way, the average smoker has missed 2.7 days more than a non-smoker. These are the kind of metrics and measurement tools that director starts to look at and go, tell me more. And oh, by the way, then we can start to talk about recruiting and retention. And again, I'm not going to bring him, I'm going to call him out right now, but I'm not going to ask him to jump on. But, we've got Ryan Wolf, he leads the workplace wellness directive for Gallup, sitting here on this call right now. And these are a lot of the tools and the research that Gallup has been doing for decades. Whether it's the Q12, whether it's the well-being index, whether it's the global emotional report, the world happiness report, you start to name all the things that Gallup has been doing. And it all comes back down to, if we can get our employees to function optimally in the environment that we have created, and that is what we as workplace wellness professionals, or wellness professionals in general, have the most influence on. We aren't necessarily going to be able to do Corey smokes, I'm going to get Corey to quit smoking. But if we create an environment that basically makes it so that smoking is just not a cool thing to do, you'll be surprised that Corey would slow that down. My favorite story, and I have to tell it because it's such a good one. It's a beer distributor. It's a beer manufacturing firm. It's actually a distillery, a beer brewery. They had a smoking cessation program that actually encouraged fellow smokers to not give smoke or cigarettes to folks that are trying to quit. And they actually did a great job of incentivizing the smokers to not give a cigarette to the guys that are trying to quit. It was a brilliant concept. And they did have a number of folks that quit smoking. And as we all know, it's those stressors that happen. It's like, oh, I had a bad day, I need a cigarette. It's just one would be good. I'll go out to the smoke shack. My buddies will give me one, and they look at him and go, "Get out of here. You're trying to quit." And all of a sudden, that person has a support network, not on one side, but on both sides of that equation. That's wellness. It's not a couch to 5K program. And as we all know, if you raise your hand, how many people want to do a 5K? We need a couch to stand up program. And that's really where we have got to get going. And that's going back to what Corey was saying earlier. We have probably overbuilt some of the things that we have overbuilt. And we've got to remind ourselves that nobody knows what wellness is. There's a vaping and wellness store just right down the street from my house here. So that tells you where the terminology of wellness goes. We've got to understand, let's get going, couch to stand up. Let's start there.
Awesome. And part of this, the movement and promotion and communication is working very closely with your target audience. It's like communication 101. Get to know their wants, their desires, their interests, help them know who they are, and then have them share that collectively with you. And you'll be more effective in communication and promotion. And the reason why I say this is the paid time wellness actually came while this concept title is I was out fishing with a small business owner, and he said, "It sounds like to me what you're talking about is like something similar to paid time off, which I have for my employees. I want to tell them, I want you to invest in your wellness or well-being well on the clock." That is a huge step forward. So I'm not saying we're married to this title. Well, my wife's on here. We're certainly not married to this title, but we like the concept. We think it's a good way to communicate how it could be integrated with business operations. So Tyler, we're running a little short on time here. Should we ask maybe 2 more questions and get their input in the chat? Looks like the chat's blowing up here. We got some nice private conversations going.
Yep. I think we move on to our next question.
All right. In the field of wellness, everybody, if we were successful in 20 years, what would it look like? In 20 years, if we were successful, if we did the things we needed to do, what would that look like? And this is important for NWI, right? They're going to help create the roadblock, or excuse me, they're going to remove the roadblocks, and they're going to create the steps to help you get there.
I'm only about 12 years from retirement, so I don't care about 20. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
That's why I didn't say Chuck will help you get there. NWI will help you get there.
Thank you, Corey.
All right, Kevin has
Corey,
answered with.
I've only met Tyler over the phone like this a few times, but Corey and I have had more than one conversation, and he still owes me, the next time I'm up in Stevens Point, he still owes me an evening out. You dogged me the last time I came up, by the way.
I did. I'm sorry. Unintentionally.
Corey.
Finland, Kelly for the score.
So I want to comment on Kevin George's. He says healthier communities equals less medical cost, nicer people, longer lives, healthier people. And if I was to add my commentary, Kevin, it falls in that same line, right? What I would like to see in the next 20 years, and I think we are all on the same page, right? Is a reduction in chronic diseases and an improvement in all the health indices across the board. A shift in overweight and obese people to less, reduction in prediabetes and diabetes, metabolic syndrome, you name it. And then a change in environment. And I already mentioned a lot about that from a society standpoint, but there needs to be a shift. So when Corey asked me that question from the original polls, and government was one of those pieces, I thought about that, like, what does that mean? And where would they potentially stand in, or where would they make some concessions or changes? And I keep going back to, Coca-Cola. They have different recipes for different countries. And it just boggles my mind that we're allowed to have some of those different recipes in the US with different ingredients that they don't allow in other countries. So if I was to add some, again, more comments on the government side of things, it might be something along those lines without taking it all away, right? I'm not here to start a mutiny on anybody's hands. You can still offer everything, but it's change in subsidizations or access to healthy things. And it's that environment that's also going to build and breed our culture into where we want to take it in the future. So that would be kind of like my take on that, but also I continue to say it's that paid time wellness. We need to set those people up for success. And if we don't start with those building blocks, we're just never going to get there.
I love Kathy Pinkham's. We've got to really look at the social justice side of things. It's that multicultural competence philosophy, something that, again, Linda Howard, Aldrina Williams, and Deborah Wilcox started in 2015 here at NWI, and could not be more excited about where that has gone and moved forward. A couple of other things that I've really seen in here that I really liked is really talking about it, even from, I apologize, the chat flew fast and I can't get to it, but somebody had mentioned something about we are getting away from using the word health. And in all honesty, I think that's a good thing. We need to be getting back to health and wellness, not health is wellness or wellness is health. We need to actually help better define the difference between the two. And again, you hear Jane Ellery, you'll hear pathogenic and salutogenic philosophies, but they're academics. They talk big words like that. I talk about, illness and wellness. It's really looking at it from, you've got to have good health and a good environment. And when we talk about health, that is truly thinking about it from the physical, nutritional, spiritual perspective. But we've also got to look at the environment and what's posing from there. Do they have access to those healthcare pieces? Is our healthcare system in the United States, in the world, which one's better, and how do we make these things work, and how do we make them happen? Because I can tell you right now, and again, going back to the Gallup information, anybody that ever wants to read a great book, read a book called The Coming Jobs War by Jim Clifton. Jim really talks about, there's really a couple of things in that book that really stuck into my head. And one of them was what everybody really wants in this world is a good job. And if we actually can create 1.8 million jobs, good jobs in this world, so many of the problems that are happening would go away. And then the other thing that he really talked about, especially in the United States, is that the amount of money that is being spent today on healthcare in the workplace is taking away from being able to do innovation, research, growth, adding jobs, because we are spending all that money on healthcare premiums and things like that. So these are the things that we've really got to start to understand, how health and wellness start to truly make a difference.
Yeah, and so there's one way to look at it. Thank you, Chuck. Tyler, there's, the outcomes perspective. What would be the health outcomes? What would the environment look like in 20 years? And then there's also, like, what do you see? What are the behaviors? And I would love for people to know themselves and be true to themselves, to be authentic, to be who they are. And that does play a role in that multicultural competency model. And inclusivity, diversity, those are strongly integrated and connected. That people know what health was, they're educated, like Chuck said, they know what health is, they know what wellness is, and they're trained on time management, life management, how to make healthy decisions. And then the most important step, they're engaged. Okay, so we have this environment that's conducive. So what? Are people doing anything in the environment? Are they actually participating in healthy behaviors? Are they engaged? And if they are, the culture will shift. If they're not, the culture won't shift. You can have the best environment in the world, but if other people aren't doing it, there's no role modeling, there's no sense of belonging. So I think a goal 20 years from now or 30 years from now will be to see people engaged and have the culture begin to shift. So culture, environment, a little bit of play on those two. Do you want to pause a little bit there, or do you think we've covered that enough? We'll do maybe one more. Do we have time for one more, Chuck?
Let's go one more.
Okay.
We've got an engaged group here. I love it.
So Corey, I'm going to leave this one up to you. Do you want to finish with our third question or a fourth question?
I really like, I think this one will drive answers to the other question. So let's ask this question. Why are wellness programs perceived as unsuccessful? Keep in mind, your answer to this will drive how we make them better, how we invest more time, more energy, more resources. That was going to be our next question. So why are they perceived unsuccessful, or why are they unsuccessful?
Unsustainable, not supported by management. That's the first two that popped in here. Poor design. Derek, I agree with that 100%. Hard to show outcomes. Yes. Not implemented well. Amen. No buy-in. Behavior change in terms of health and well-being, difficult without addressing overall well-being. Just one more thing to do. Candace, so true. Coercive. I agree. Engagement is almost impossible to maintain. Hazel, I'd like to have that conversation with you. Loss of personal approach, too much platform-based. D, agree. They are not relevant. Agree. We're not listening to people's actual needs. Oh, I love that one, Tiffany. Thank you. Not integrated in overall healthcare. All right, Corinne. There's some conversations in that one that we've seen that actually are positive and negative in that regards. Not personalized. Agreed. Don't take a social determinants of health approach into account. Amy, I like that one. Core values not considered. Matt, agreed. Too focused on certain metrics of success. Very true. Wellness is not a cookie cutter and hard to target. Not integrated in the company culture. Chris, bingo.
Yep.
There you go. That's holy
huge.
Smokes.
Right. Like,
And I was probably reading every third one because they were coming so fast. So thank you guys. This is amazing.
I do want to add on to some of the I was reading every second one of your third. So wanted to comment on some of the things that I deal with on a daily basis with the clients that I work with. And a few people did mention in there, I think Derek said it, and I don't know if it was Allison, but the metrics that are being tracked, right? ROI, right? And we've talked about this as an industry for years. Like, getting a hard, fast ROI is almost near impossible, right? So how do we shift the conversation to that VOI, or the value of investment, and even to that next level of the value of caring by an organization? And Chris had mentioned that it's not threaded within the company fabric or their culture, and that's what we need to start to do, is to build that conversation about, hey, as an employer, we're here to care about you, and we want to offer you the programs and enable you to live healthier lifestyles. That's a common conversation that I have. And it's, again, offering them those programs that are their actual wants. Somebody had put that in quotations, in their actual wants and needs, because so many times I sit in meetings and we can assume what they want and what they want to see. And it falls on deaf ears, right? That's not what they want, right? I can tell you what the highest risk factors are for the majority of organizations in the US, but that doesn't mean they're going to engage them. And then, as Corey mentioned previously, how do we get that engagement when there's so much other stuff going on? There's so much noise. And my last comments are, in line with what people are saying is wellness, well-being, general health is a long-term strategy. We're never going to get to where we want to go or where we want to be overnight. It's not a light switch, can't turn it on and off, and it is a lot of hard work, and we have to be willing to put in that effort to get to where we want to go. So again, I appreciate the commentary. As Chuck said, like this back and forth and the comments and the feedback that you've been giving are invaluable, and we really appreciate it. So Corey, I want to toss it to you. Sorry, Chuck, I don't mean to cut you off. I want to toss it back to Corey. One last sentiment about, why do you see it as unsuccessful, or what do you see within your industry, potentially from the university setting, and like, what do you see happening in the future?
Just really quickly, it kind of falls back to participation and engagement. And to be honest with you, it's like we design, I think Derek Bell said it, design. And it's not just like the logistics of the design, it's the topic, it's how it's communicated, it's how it's promoted. Let's just remember, people act based on their perceptions. So how do they perceive a program to be is based on their social media, their experience in physical education, their experience in health education. All those experiences determine their perception. So when somebody creates a wellness program or a health and wellness program, there are going to be some people that are attracted to it based on their perception and their previous experiences. There are going to be other people that are like, absolutely not. That's just for the yoga lovers or just the wellness people. That's fluff. I'm out. I've tried that, done that, doesn't work. I'm frustrated with the wellness industry. There's so much crap on social media. I don't know who to trust. There's controversy, there's back and forth. So just keep that in mind, that that's the state of the people you're trying to engage. So we have a lot of work to do. And how do we meet with people one-to-one and ask them, what do you really want? How do you want this information to be communicated? And then that's how you start developing programs. It's very intentional. It's user-based. So you can enhance the user experience and reach them where they're at. So we have a lot of work to do. It was a little long-winded. Chuck, I don't know if I stole some of your response.
Nope. You did a great job with that, because really the other thing that we've all got to remember, whether you're working in a community health situation, clinical health situation, or a workplace health situation, think about, what are you trying to solve? What is the issue that is being solved in the public health arena? How do we make sure that we get access to these things? How do we take care of the social determinants of health? How do we make sure that those things are interwoven into the conversation beyond just looking at the clinical health outcomes? We got to think about it from, access to transportation, access to good jobs, access to these, good food. From the workplace perspective, let's face it, what we just talked about, the manager is probably your biggest obstacle. What is the manager's biggest problem? I'm telling you right now, I can tell you, I'm a 20-year HR guy. So-and-so's not here. How do I do that job now? You fix absenteeism, you're going to own your supervisors and your managers. If you can help them understand how to make sure that their people show up every day and be functional, you'll be shocked how successful you can say your wellness program is right then and there. Recruitment and retention. These are factors. We've got to get outside of these clinical outcomes. We've got to get outside of even VOA, ROA, any of the A's. We've got to be really looking at solving the problem, whether you're in a clinical position, you're a community position, you're at home, you're at work. It doesn't matter. Solve the problem, and you'll be surprised how wellness can solve it.
Well, I just want to add a little bit here in conclusion, and that's, like Tyler said, thank you so much. Your voice is contributing to driving innovation and wellness. And so we're going to use this chat function. We're going to leverage some of the data from the polls, and we're going to work with NWI to create a workshop series. And we're going to get real. We're not going to continue to try to communicate the same things and rehash some of the same things. And I'm not saying that has been done for a long time and that everyone's doing that, but we're going to have tough conversations, and we're going to be solutions focused, and we're going to engage you all. And the workshop's going to be a different format than this. It's breakout sessions, small group discussion, large group discussion. We're going to send you surveys in advance to collect more data to see which strategies are working. And we're going to share that collectively. We're going to try to move forward as a community, as a wellness community. Because if we don't do it, it may not happen. So that's where we're coming from. I'm just trying to wet the whistle a little bit, so to speak. I think Chuck used that one. We're just trying to give you some value today, but also start the conversation for the next steps. So thank you again.
Corey, Tyler, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, I could not be more excited. Great community. Heather Lowe, I agree. This is a fantastic. We will probably take December off because, well, let's face it, it's December, but we're already starting to have some conversations with some folks for January. Watch for Reimagining Wellness. Also continue to watch for our webinar series. D. Sherma is coming up next week, and I'll tell you, that one's going to be an interesting conversation. Thank you, everybody. Look forward to more conversations and stay in touch.
Thank you all.